Hi, today we will study about biomedical engineering strategies for cancer. So for this chapter, we will study about first cancer as a malignant neoplasm. So first understand the cancer, and we will consider about more like in engineering point of view how to approach this problem. So first, we will discuss about cancer screening and diagnosis of cancer, and the grading of cancer, and later on we will discuss about the treatment of cancer. And so for the more modern world, we will be discussing personalized medicine in cancer treatment. So what is cancer? So cancer is a little bit of genetic term that it is actually a class of a disease. So it's not a single kind of specific disease, it's more of a class of disease. And it has three characteristics. So first is uncontrolled or unregulated growth. So the cells keep proliferate, and what happens? It will make a mess. So that we call as a tumor. So tumor formation is the first important characteristics of cancer. And what's the second? So when the cells grow in the body, then it forms a tumor. And what the cancer is when that cells, in fact, intrudes upon and destroys adjacent tissues. So the invasion is another important characteristics of cancer. So that's the second as a invasion. And finally, still when we call a cancer, or the main risk or the danger of cancer is the cancer cells actually spread out from one location we call as a primary site and to another location in the body. So it can move out via blood or lymphatic vessels. So that spreading of the cells from one side to another side, we call it as a metastasis. So these three, uncontrolled growth, an invasion to neighboring tissue, and metastasizing to a distant part of one's body, that characterizes we call as a generic cancer. So when the cells are uncontrollable growth, and that will form a tumor, and that we call as a neoplasm. And we need to see this neoplasm. There are two types. So the first is we call a less danger. So that's called a benign tumor. So the characteristic of benign tumor is the growth is self-limited. So it's kind of self-defined, and it kind of grows. So it's a tumor, so it grows. So it's expansile, while it doesn't really infiltrate to the neighboring tissue. So that's a characteristic of when we call benign tumor. So because of that, it does not metastasize. It's kind of self-defined, and it will not to spread to another organ. On the other hand, the dangerous part of the tumor, dangerous kinds of tumor, we call it as a malignant. Of course, that malignant is a bad word. So that kind of tumors are now infiltrate to the neighboring tissue or organ, and it metastasizes, even shed the cells to another part of the body, and eventually it kills the organism or a human. So so these tumors, we need to differentiate between whether it's benign and we feel a little safe. While when we hear about malignant or malignancy, that means this actually has a potential to kill the patient. So in the end, so the cancer is a rather generic term for a malignant neoplasm. So neoplasm means, a neo means a new, plasm means a formation. So it's a new formation. So by definition, the cancer is about malignant neoplasm. So then let's study a little more further between the benign versus malignant neoplasm. So this is a table to distinguish themselves. So in terms of growth, benign tumor growth is slow, while malignant tumor can be very fast or rapid. About the tumor formation, when the cells are growing, sometimes the cells are encapsulated, such as a collagen. So encapsulation part is another clue to differentiate benign versus malignant. So where differentiated capsule, so it's encapsulated, then it's rather benign. But if it's not, that means it can be, the cancer cells can infiltrate. So that's another aspect. So because of that, benign tumors are not invasive, while malignant tumors are invasive to local structures and tissues. That is a problem. And in terms of cell division, you think about the growth of the cell. So when you are looking into pathological sample, so the tissue sample, when you are looking under the microscope with contrast, looking for the dividing cells, because the growth, slow growth means there are rare dividing cells, not many dividing cells. So we can call it as a low mitotic index. While in malignant tumor, there are many dividing cells or high mitotic index, mitotic index. So in the end, the most important part is whether the tumors will spread to distant site. So that's called metastasize, and benign, by definition, does not metastasize, while malignant tumors can metastasize via route for this blood vessel or lymphatic vessel. So here's another cartoon showing benign versus malignant tumors. You can see while there are normal cells and there is a benign cells, but their growth is only locally and cannot spread by invasion or metastasis. So it's well capsulated. While malignant tumors, you can see the encapsulation is broken by the malignant cells can crawl out, so invading the neighboring tissues. Usually that neighboring tissue contains blood vessel, so or lymphatic vessel. So it can enter into the blood vessel. That means through the circulation, these malignant cells can lodge and grow in another distant part of our body, and that form a new formation of tumor, and that we call metastasis. So let's have one example of a skin cancer. So doctors or dermatologists, skin doctors developed a simple way to differentiate, quickly see whether benign versus a malignant. So here's an example. So for skin cancer, especially what matters for dermatologists is a melanoma cells. So melanoma is a skin cancer that can kill the patient. So that's very important to distinguish. So here comes, you can see the left column is a benign, while right column is malignant. Let's see that simple ABCDE rules. So round and symmetrical is a good sign, while asymmetrical means it can be more malignant. So that asymmetry is an important factor. And second, you can see the boundaries are pretty regular, while irregular shape of the boundary or border. So the second is a border. The shape of the border matters for benign versus malignant. And the third, you can see the color is a single color, while here's a multiple light to darker color. So this is a bad sign. So we see the color to say about to judge the risk of benign versus malignant. And 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 the next one is about the size of this lesion. So if it's smaller than the 6 millimeter, and that's likely to be benign. But if it's bigger, already big, then it's a problem. It can be malignant. So diameter, the size of the lesion, skin lesion, it's matters. But even if it's small, but you have to watch it over time to see if they grow over time or evolve. So evolution is one important. If the lesion keeps staying there with the same size, that could mean more benign. So these simple A, B, C, D, E, asymmetry, border, color, and diameter and evolution would be a simple and good way for even dermatologists or even the people who have a lesion as a good indication. So now let's discuss about in terms of an epidemiological aspect. So epidemiology is talking about the prevalence of a disease in a statistical way. So neoplasia as a new growth or new formation of a tumor, then let's look at what matters for this neoplasia or cancer formation. So we can ask, would age matters? Yes, it does matter. Why then elderly people are more prone to cancer? So let's look at the data first. So the data says here, male, female, in both cases over their age, the cases are increasing. So age matters. And why does it go this way? Because cancer eventually is a disease from a genetic mutation of a cell which is responsible for cell growth and entering cell division. So that proliferation machinery, if there's a mutation, and that's likely to go to cancer or tumor formation. So that mutation is likely to accumulate over time. So that's why elderly people are prone to cancer. From more recent study, it does say that DNA replication process, there's always an error rate, you remember that. And because of that, over time, the cells proliferate, divide, there's always an error rate. And if we are not very lucky, there's more chance for mutation happening in the important part of our DNA. So the second one is a gender. So gender difference matters. So for male versus female, so breast cancer probably is more prevalent in female, you can see. And there are ovarian cancer only happens to female. Likewise, prostate cancer only happens in male. And what about geographic area? So how does geography affect cancer incidence? There's a good example that, ozone layer, the opening of ozone layer in this in the southern part of the earth, especially in Australia, that matters because of the UV radiation from the sun causes more skin cancer in that area. And even in Australia, let's say there's a Caucasian white people versus a darker skinned people. And the evolution of having the different skin color is probably caused by the latitude, the amount of the sunlight to us. So the more people who have been living in more equator tend to have a darker color, which just means that the more melanin pigment under the epidermis skin, while the another part, more like upper North Pole or South Pole, this part, people tend to have a less melanin making them have a more pale skin or whitish color. So people in Australia, even, like whitish people are more prone to having skin cancer because they are less melanin, less protected from the UV light entering from the sun. So what about occupation? So even occupation might affect the incidence of cancer. In the history, the chimney boy in England, UK, tend to get cancer. So that has been shown that what causes it, because that chimney boy inhaled a lot of soot, and that may have caused a higher incidence of lung cancer. Likewise, there's a so-called asbestos problem, which is a fine fiber, and that when it enters into our body, and that is as a foreign body, our cells try to go there and engulf and try to digest and disintegrate. But look at this figure. If the fiber size is like this, the cells try to envelope the asbestos fiber, but it's not possible. So there's a consistent chronic inflammation happens, and that causes these cells who are trying to engulf and causing mutations over time. So this can cause a mesothelioma, or if this happens into our lungs, this can cause lung cancer. So asbestos exposure is a big issue for developing a lung cancer. And finally, of course, heredity matters. So, so heredity means if we inherit, let's say, mutation from our ancestor or parents, then that may cause increase the likelihood of getting cancer. So here's some data with about cancers. Some cancers having inherited mutation. So there are like some type of cancer, such as ovarian cancer, has a highly more, like even 19% of ovarian cancer having inherited mutation. So heredity matters, but not all the cancer types. You can see, for example, AML, this leukemia cancer is having about 4% is responsible from inherited mutation. So we have discussed about the cancer as a malignant neoplasm, and next time we will discuss about the hallmarks of the cancer. Thank you for your attention.